The topic is about quest for the unknown. Kamala Das's introduction as a poet of body and sexual aspiration, and then we'll also discuss a little bit about an introduction by Kamala Das, symbolism and imagery. Both the questions are very important for the examination purpose. Got it? Both the questions are important for the examination purpose. Now, let us start with the search for an authentic self is at the heart of introduction. This question is often set in the examination. Do you agree? Discuss with suitable example. So let us go into the poem. Kamala Das expresses through her poetries the period in love and longing for the carnal desire. No woman can say that she doesn't have that carnal desire to express herself, her feelings of love. So here she introduces herself of this carnal desire that she aspires for. Living in a closed society, Kamala Das was bold enough to portray the theme of sex and love for her audience, in spite of range of experience. She did not compose for metaphysical literary quest. All her verses overflew while she was trying to woo a man of her choice. Therefore, her poetries are human, too human, and catch our imagination for its quality of honesty and frankness. Introduction. Sex has been one of the most predominant themes in the works of Kamala Das. Whichever poem you study of Kamala Das, the question of the sex and identity is always there. So you shouldn't take it that she is trying to say something which a woman shouldn't say it. No, nothing like that. We are happy because she says the factuality of life, and she is not trying to fool us by her expression. So she did not compose for metaphysical literary quest. All her verses overflow while she was trying to woo a man of her choice. Therefore, her poetries are human, too human, and catch our imagination for its quality of honesty and frankness. Sex has been one of the most predominant themes in the works of Kamala Das. Time and again, she exploits this theme in delineating the relationship between her male and female characters. Unlike other Indian writers, she does not resort to oblique or indirect reference to sex or love making. That is, of course, not there. Rather, takes up a bold and hitherto unexploited approach to her sex. As once stated by Wordsworth, that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions or feelings. Kamala Das epitomizes this utterance and let loose a series of emotions which find place not only in her poetic work but also her short stories and novels. For rendering color and life to her expression, Kamala Das chooses words and language which has a uniqueness of their own. Though for a first-time reader she may turn out to be more explicit and going little overhead in her treatment of sexual love, a careful and minute study of her works will leave her readers smitten. SMITTA with her charisma. When autobiography was published in a serialized form in the newspaper, it took the prudish Kerala society by storm and created a lot of furore in the middle class social circles of the time. No other women were as open to express their sex as she was. She was pressurized by the people around her, including her father, then the managing director Malayalam daily Mathrubhumi, into starting a publication, but a writer was too courageous. But our writer was too courageous to be intimidated by these antics. She is a free and indomitable spirit which is truly bent upon asserting her own freedom and creating a considerable and substantial niche among the contemporary Indo-Anglican writers. Kamala Das mentions in her autobiography My Story. She says the writer's raw material is not stone or clay, it is a personality. It sometimes compels the readers to ponder whether the sexual love depicted in her works does not have a direct or to the least an indirect bearing of her own sexual experiences in life. Kamala Das was exposed to their sexual advances quite early in her life. During her schooling at Urkulam, Punya Urkulam, she had a first-hand experience of homosexuality when she is handed over love letters by a plump girl, her schoolmate, Devaki. Her stay in the boarding school also brought her face to face with the lives of nuns who were deprived of their sexual life and behaved in a frustrated and sadist way. She realizes that sex is a big taboo in conservative Malayali society. Even the married women could not discuss it among themselves. Kamala Das writes, no wonder the women of the best Nayar families never mentioned sex. They were not allowed to do so. It was the principal phobia. They associated it with violence and bloodshed, but they had been fed on the stories of Ravana who perished due to his desire for Sita, and of Kichaka who was stoned to death by Draupadi's legal husband Bhima only because he coveted her. This is all known from our ancient myths. She also finds the hostel maids getting infatuated towards the boys of their age. It is already practical. She herself admits of getting sexually attracted towards the different boys, though the relationship proved to be unsuccessful and did not last for long. So these sporadic occurrences around her stimulated her poetic self and left an indelible impression on her sensitive poetic mind. It supplied her with the raw material to which she applies different treatments to give it different shapes in her works. Devendra Koheli, a famous critic of hers, writes about Kamala Das. Almost all the critics of Kamala Das have been quick to notice that part of the strength of poetry emanates from a powerful personality. But while the vigor of a personality seems to operate rather transparently and on the surface as it were, it does not detract from the complexity of women's ambivalence, which is the certitude and the precariousness of sexual love. Apart from discussing her Shakespeare experience at boarding school, extramarital affairs, the writer has also given clues about the homosexual leanings of her husband. Sometimes her husband would indulge in his homosexual acts, even in the presence of the writer. In her autobiography, Kamala Das writes, at this time, my husband turned to his old friend for comfort. They behaved like lovers in my presence. To celebrate my birthday, they shoved me out of the bedroom and locked themselves in. I stood for a while wondering what two men could possibly do together to get some physical rapture. But after some time, my pride made me move away. So, in a volume of short stories, Kamala Das invariably includes at least one story dealing with homosexuality. In a short story, Iqbal, the writer tells the tale of a newly married, of a newly includes at least one story dealing with homosexuality. See, in that short story, Iqbal, the writer, tells the tale of a newly married couple. The husband, after marriage, tells his wife about his roommate in the YMCA before marriage. He was a good looking youth named Iqbal. On coming across the married couple, Iqbal feels depressed and attempts suicide by consuming overdose of sleeping pills. He is taken to the hospital where his life is saved by doctors. About the use of sexuality in her works, William Walsh, WALSH, writes, her poetry is self-centered and unabashedly sexual, although the sexuality seems more fascinating to the poet because it is hers than because it is sexual. Some critics and readers have charged her being too explicit and adding too much detail in describing her love-making senses. They claim that these descriptions would have been avoided by simply suggesting their sexual encounters. So, their blame. So, it is they blame her for glorifying sex or physical lust in her works. Another critic, Harimohan Prasad, remarks about the poetic works of Kamala Dash. Her poetry has been considered as a gimmick in sex of strip-teasing words, an overexposure of body or snippets of trivia. That is what he says, snippets of trivia. But the truth is that her poetry is an autobiography, an articulate voice of her ethnic identity. Her Dravidian culture in her, the poet is the poetry fully obliterating Eliot's distinction between the man suffering and the mind creating. Kamala Das, being a thorough iconoclast, overlooks her criticism. These charges do not disturb her because she is fully conscious what she is attempting to convey to her readers. She writes, if my mode of writing is striptease, let it remain so. There is a great difference between a patient exposing his nudity to her doctor and a cabaret artist baring herself to the provocative. The motive of the one is not vulgar, but a peeping Tom looking through the keyhole into the doctor's chamber. The nudity may seem exciting. Notwithstanding these charges, Kamala Das has been a perpetual spring of inspiration for other women writers and filled them with a sense of self-confidence and self-worth. Kamala Das does not utter any conclusion on the basis of bookish knowledge, which is apparently far from reality, but on a personal experience and the married lives she observes around her. She, being a very sensitive and observing child, finds that the life of the married woman around her was far from satisfactory. She observes, of course, this is her observation. You may take it in any way you like. Now, she observes, and the observation is something of her own. What does she say? In the autobiography, Kamala Das writes, at this point of time, my husband turned to his old friend for comfort. They behaved like lovers in my presence. To celebrate my birthday, they shoved me out of the bedroom and locked themselves in. So, in a volume of the short stories, Kamala Das invariably includes at least one story dealing with homosexuality. In a short story, Iqbal, she has done the very same thing. What do you find out of it? On coming across a married couple, Iqbal feels depressed and attempts suicide by consuming overdose of sleeping pills. So about the use of sexuality in her works, many critics have given many opinions about her. Some critics and readers have charged her of being too explicit and adding too much detail in describing her love-making scenes. They claim that these descriptions would have been avoided by simply suggesting the sexual encounters. They blame her for glorifying sex or physical lust in her works. So I told you about Hari Mohan Das, how he has taken her to be. Remarks about the poetic works of Kamala Das. Her poetry has been considered as a gimmick in sex or striptease in words. Kamala Das, being a thorough iconoclast, overlooks her criticism. These charges do not perturb her because she is fully conscious what she is attempting to convey to her readers. She writes, if my mode of writing is striptease, let it remain so. There is a great difference between a patient exposing his nudity to a doctor and a cabinet artist bearing herself to the provocative. That is the way I look out at things. Kamala Das does not enter any conclusion on the basis of bookish knowledge, which is apparently far from reality but on a personal experience and the married life she observes around her. So she observes that only dissatisfaction and unhappiness exists in an illicit relationship between a man and a woman. She sees many women in Malayali society who are not happy with their husbands and looking for the happiness outside the ambit of marriage. So she expresses it candidly in autobiography. 146 Journal of Indian Research, Volume 1, Number 4, October December 2013. So the only heroine whose sex life seemed comparatively untumultuous was Radha, who waited on the banks of Jamuna for her blue-skinned lover. But she was another wife and so an adulteress to come to Krishna. In the orbit of illicit sex, there seems to be only crudeness and violence. Sometimes we also feel that Kamala Das's poetry is replete with sensual terms, expressing an urgent urge for sex. About Kamala Das, another critic, M.K. Nayak, remarks, the most obvious feature of Kamala Das's poetry is the uninhibited frankness with which she talks about sex, referring to the musk of sweet between the breasts, the smell between the breasts of a woman, the warm shock of menstrual blood, and even my pubis. The poet, after having relationship with many men, feels disillusioned with love and physical pleasure and starts thinking about the futility of human relations and existence. Here we are also reminded of T.S. Eliot's masterpiece, The Waste Land, where Eliot talks about the human existence and immortal practices attached to it, being absorbed in amorous meeting with lovers does not provide for comfort and tenderness. She feels as if she has come out of a deep slumber and realizes that it is unreal and beauty of her body will wither soon. This body which I wear without joy, this body burdened with lenience, slander, toy, owned by men of substance, shall perhaps wither, battling with my darling's impersonal lust, or it shall gross and reach large proportions before its end. In her poem, A Loving Battle, she explains how she searches the ideal lover in a relationship with various men. She is fully convinced that the ideal love is something which cannot be achieved through the physical contacts with a man. This poem also reminds us of this famous line of Shakespeare's tragedy Hamlet: frailty, thy name is woman, when Hamlet discovers that a mother planned and killed her husband, King Hamlet, and married the uncle, Claudius. So the weakness in character and the moral uprightness of a woman. Here, Kamala Das makes the similar attempt at the men, suggesting that men are also morally corrupt and they can be easily lured into a trap. Men are worthless to trap them. Use the cheapest bait of all, but never love, which in a woman must mean tears in a silence and, of course, silence is the blood. So the sexual affairs which Kamala Das described in her works are not meant for seeking the sensual pleasure alone. She feels that this means someday she will come across her God, the beauteous Lord Krishna, face to face. She admits it. She admits in I studied all men. It was entirely without lust. I hope that someday, as I as I lay with a man somewhere beneath the bone at a deadly spot, a contact to be made, and that afterwards each movement of my life becomes meaningful. So I look for the beauteous Krishna in every man. Every Hindu girl is in reality wedded to Lord Krishna. Thus, we can argue that the age and the time becomes matured. Kamala Das was fully aware that the objective she wanted to attain cannot be achieved without the means of man woman relationship of physical intercourse. Despite having met different men, she still feels a vacuum in herself. Her sexual desires do not provide the comfort or the contentment she is aspiring. From men she turns towards Lord Krishna for solace and addresses her as a lover in the poem. But a belief in Krishna is also short-lived as the poet converts to Islam amid a fierce criticism from conservative Hindus. Now, instead of Lord Krishna, she begins to address her poems to Allah in 1999. Thus, we can easily observe that throughout her life, the poet seems to be researching for the ultimate lover, the unknown, who would provide her with the ultimate bliss. But time and again fails in accomplishing her goal. So there are lots of symbolism and imagery in the poem introduction. This question is also often asked in the university exam. So the poem and introduction by Kamala Das portrays her own life experiences. She was a confessional poetess, an introduction to very strongly confessional and maybe one of the most confessional poems by Kamala Das. Each and every line of the poem is a capsule zipped to comprise all her sadness and strong objections to the patriarchal society. Even though she portrays her own experience, it is for all. She tries to generalize them for all. Being a poetess, Kamala Das is successful in portraying her private zones of her life, such as love, marriage, sex, kids, etc., even the sexual encounters too. So the poem and introduction begins by proclaiming that though she had no interest in politics, she knows the name of all who are in power, from India's first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and onwards. Also, she claims that she can repeat all those names as easy as the days of weeks or the names of months. In next stanza, we can see poetess is very proud to say she is born in brown in color, not brown with very brown. First, she introduces herself saying that she is Indian, then reveals the color is very brown. After that, she is also proud to be born in Malabar. Soon, Kamala Das expresses a disagreement with the argues of her friends. Visiting cousins, critics, and all, everybody asks her not to write in English language because it is not her mother tongue. Poetess will tell them why are they not ready to leave her all alone. Then she tells that if I speak three languages, write into dream in one. And she complains that why can't she speak the language that she likes? The language she speaks is hers, and its distortions and queerness are hers. Despite the request from a friend and family, poetess says that line roads, calling of the clothes is to the clothes, and likewise Kamala Das uses her own style of language that can express her longing, hopes and pain and joys. Thus it is useful to her and it is a human speech of the mind that can see, hear, and aware. It is not an abstract speech like deaf and blind speech of trees in a storm, monsoon clouds, the rain, or the incoherent mutterings of the blazing funeral pyre. Cheetah, we say. It burns with a different sound when it burns the body. For Kamala Das, her speech is coherent because it has a meaning. So the use of symbols like the incoherent mutterings of the blazing fire, deaf and blind speech of storms, monsoon cloud, rain, sounds, and loads of clothes. lying, etc., are the very strong, powerful explosion of a tough and strong disapproval to her colleagues and relatives' opinion. Now, poetry starts to reveal something private from her life. Kamala Das always portrays her painful situations in a sexual life. Here in the poem and introduction, author tells I was child and later they told me I grew, but I became tall. My limbs swelled and one or two places sprouted hair. She was a child, but her parents told her that she has grown up. But it was only in means of her height. She got hair in her secret parts and her limbs are swollen. Kamala Das has asked for love. Her father brought a young boy, age of 16, into a bedroom and closed the door. Kamala Das again goes deep, exploring her private experiences being a wife in her early age. She got a husband in her early age. In their private room, she felt like she was beaten. The term beaten is presented not exactly for beaten by a husband, but it symbolizes the pain she had in her sexual life. Her body was just growing up, it was not completely ready to be a sexual partner, being a wife. So it's clear that Kamala Das had no happiness in her married life. Soon she mentions the weight of my breast and womb crushed me. That means the man was upon her doing sex with her. This indicates pregnancy, which will follow. She could not bear the weight of her breast and felt crushed by the womb. It pushed her to shrink in a corner. After that, the thought of being a tomboy, not to sit in a corner. She wore her brother's trousers and a shirt and cut her long hair short. She chose dress of a boy because the dress sari always indicates a girl or wife. Her tomboyish nature made disgust in the minds of the so-called categorizers, the people who categorize men and women with limitations in freedom. Womanliness is not just sitting in front in the four walls of a room. Amy or be Kamala, or better still, be Madhava Kutti. That was her name. This is her interest in choosing her name. She doesn't want the name Das as a tail at the end of her name because it indicates to the patriarchal domination of men. She received her tail name Dash from her husband Madhava Dash's name. Poetess says it is better to call her Amy Kamala or still be Madhava Kutti. Don't play at schizophrenia or be a nymphia. What does this mean? People accuse that she's schizophrenic and nymphic, attracted to men. Schizophrenia is a disorder resulted in the interpretation of reality. Michael Foucault, this is taught in other universities but not in yours. Michael Foucault understood schizophrenia as a reflection of a society's inflexibility associated with an individual mental condition. Nymph is a woman with strong sexual desire. Kamala Das's marriage was in her early age or 16. It stimulated her to feel sense of shamefulness to hear femininity which came before time. That is why Kamala Das tried to overcome her femininity, being tomboyish, wearing the dress of a boy. But people look this tomboyish appearance as a nympho. I met a man, loved him, called him not by thy name. He is every man. Who wants a woman just as I am every woman who seeks love? She's right what she says. Always we see a patriarchal society around us. Here Kamala Das also experiences the bitterness of patriarchal domination from her beloved too. Poetess generate her husband to the husbands of every woman. Anywhere and everywhere I see the one who calls himself I. In this world, he's tightly packed like the salt in its sheath. It is I who drink lonely, drinks at 12 midnight in hotels of strange towns. It is I who love, it is I who make love. And she generalizes herself to all women who seeks love in their husband. Poetess, every woman, in fact, she means, seeks love, but husband always stood with an egoistic word, I am a man. It stood like a sword in its sheath. He calls himself I. Kamala Dash felt ashamed of this domination over her. I am sinner, I am saint, I am beloved, and the betrayed. I have no joy that are not yours. No, aches which are not yours. I too call myself I. When the poem comes to its end, the egoistic I slowly migrates to poetess. She also starts calling herself I. So as the role of reversal occurs, the poem, the woman who represented to become I, extending to the pinnacles of self-assessment. An introduction by Kamala Das is really wonderful piece of work. The poem is replete with imagery. One has to understand what she means. It has a great meaning, and that meaning has to be viewed from that point of view. That the meaning of the poem dealt with is very inside meaning. It has to be appreciated by all. Her exposure to her own self doesn't mean that she is ashamed of herself. No, not at all. Otherwise, she wouldn't have said things so candidly. But she has said it without any qualm of conscience. She knew that she was doing the right thing. Whatever the people say does not matter to her. But she was right in her own way. And that is all that made her the only difference. A woman of her choice. A woman who wanted to identify herself. So